Imagine a renowned teacher, a figure celebrated across an entire region for his boundless compassion and miraculous healing, and he suddenly looks at a desperate, grieving mother and compares her to a dog. I mean, it sounds like an incredibly offensive moment, a shocking failure of empathy.
It really does. On his face, it looks like a complete breakdown of his character.
Yes.
But what if that apparent insult was actually a masterful psychological trap? One designed specifically to shatter the deep-seated prejudices of everyone watching the exchange.
That reframing changes the entire dynamic. Welcome to our Sunday reflection for August 16th, 2026. Today we are setting aside the usual noise of the news cycle to examine the day's liturgical readings. Our focus is uncovering a deeply challenging mandate hidden within these ancient texts, a mandate calling for sacrificial love, fierce compassion, and the difficult work of resisting societal division.
And doing that requires recognizing the inherent dignity of the human person, which is, well, perhaps the most demanding requirement of the entire Christian tradition. The readings set for today are not passive or comforting texts meant to just reassure us. They are designed to actively confront the tribalism that is so deeply wired into human psychology.
Before we examine the specific scriptures that challenge that tribalism, if you find this homiletic reflection helpful for your spiritual grounding today, please consider sharing Clara and Horatio with someone else in your life who is seeking a moment of peace and moral clarity. To understand the tension in today's text, we really have to look at the first reading from the book of Isaiah. The prophet issues a clear command to observe what is right and do what is just.
Right, and immediately pushes past baseline ethical behavior. He moves into a vision of radical inclusion that would have absolutely shocked his original audience.
Because the text speaks explicitly of foreigners who join themselves to the Lord, promising that these outsiders will be brought to the holy mountain, making the house of prayer for all peoples. Why was that so controversial at the time?
Well, to grasp the magnitude of that prophecy, you have to understand how religion functioned in the ancient Near East. Deities were almost exclusively understood as local and tribal. A god protected a specific city, a specific valley, or a specific bloodline. If you were not of that tribe, that god had no obligation to you whatsoever.
So human nature often treats grace and mercy like a limited trust fund. The instinct is to fiercely guard the principle, keeping the dividends strictly for the insiders, the legacy beneficiaries whose lineage we approve of.
That's a perfect analogy. Religion and divine favor were viewed as fiercely protected resources. So for Isaiah to declare that the God of Israel is opening the holy mountain to foreigners, making it a house of prayer for all nations, it was a radical departure from the geopolitical norms. It completely dismantled the idea of a spiritual monopoly.
And the second writing from Paul's letter to the Romans shatters that financial model of salvation even further. The early Christian community in Rome was dealing with immense internal tension between Jewish converts who felt they had the legacy claim on God's promises and Gentile converts coming in from the outside. Paul levels the playing field entirely by writing that God delivered all to disobedience in order to have mercy upon all.
He is effectively bankrupting the concept of spiritual elitism. By stating that everyone is entirely dependent on unmerited mercy, he removes any grounds for moral superiority. No one can claim to hold the exclusive rights to divine favor.
Meaning the scriptural framework is not a walled garden of inheritance, but rather an ever-expanding frontier that actively seeks out the outsider.
Exactly. This was the essential groundwork laid by the prophets and apostles, setting the stage for a necessary paradigm shift. Because if God's mercy is universal, then the metric for human value is no longer genealogical lineage or social standing. It is an inherent dignity granted directly by the Creator.
But the theoretical expansion of grace we see in Isaiah and Romans hits a really harsh reality in the Gospel of Matthew. The narrative places Jesus withdrawing to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and a Canaanite woman approaches him, begging for the healing of her severely tormented daughter. This geographical detail of Tyre and Sidon isn't accidental, is it?
Not at all. Tyre and Sidon were firmly Gentile territory, and the very term Canaanite carried immense historical baggage for a Jewish audience. The Canaanites were not merely foreigners, they were the ancestral antagonists of Israel.
Representing the ultimate other in the cultural memory of the region, associated with centuries of territorial conflict and moral opposition.
Right. So a Jewish rabbi crossing into that territory and being approached by a Canaanite woman would have immediately triggered every ingrained prejudice the disciples possessed.
Yeah.
They're watching a historical enemy step out of the margins to demand the attention of their Messiah.
I want to examine the mechanics of Jesus' response, because on its face, it sounds exclusionary. The woman is crying out, asking for pity, and Jesus initially meets her with total silence. He doesn't say a single word.
And the disciples intervene, completely frustrated. They urge him to send her away because she keeps calling out after them. They just want the inconvenience removed.
And when Jesus finally speaks, he states he was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The woman approaches, does him homage, and begs for help, and Jesus delivers a remark that feels incredibly jarring to modern ears. He says it is not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs. How do we reconcile a deliberately offensive cultural slur with the broader Christian mandate of divine compassion?
The dissonance you are highlighting is exactly the point of the passage. Jesus is not exhibiting a failure of empathy. He is employing a highly sophisticated pedagogical trap.
By vocalizing the quiet part out loud.
Yes. By remaining silent and then using the term dogs, which was a common derogatory colloquialism used by some in the ancient world to describe Gentiles, he is holding up a mirror to the disciples' own prejudices. They want her sent away. They view her as a nuisance. Jesus adopts their exclusionary posture to demonstrate its ultimate ugliness.
He pushes the cultural norm of tribalism to its absolute breaking point so it can be shattered entirely. And the brilliance of the encounter rests entirely on the woman's rhetorical pivot.
It really does. She refuses to be dismissed by the cultural slur, but she also doesn't argue her own inherent merit.
She replies that even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from the table of their masters. She takes the exclusionary metaphor and turns it into a profound declaration of faith, recognizing that the divine trust fund of mercy is so overwhelmingly abundant that even the mere scraps falling off the table are enough to conquer the demonic torment afflicting her daughter.
Her response forces the disciples to witness the dismantling of their own worldview in real time. Because the moment she demonstrates that extraordinary faith, claiming her place in the expanding scope of divine mercy, Jesus drops the pedagogical facade entirely.
Elevating her publicly.
He declares, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish," and her daughter is healed from that hour. The profound theological breakthrough here is that sacrificial love and world-changing faith are found not in the religious center of Jerusalem, but in a Canaanite woman in foreign territory.
The grace was never limited to the children of the house. The table was always intended to be large enough for everyone. And this confrontation with the unexpected dignity of the outsider provides a fascinating lens for looking at another major event in the liturgical calendar this week. Yesterday, August 15th, marked the solemnity of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
That is a beautiful connection to make, especially when you consider the theological implications of Mary's role.
When we look at Vatican teachings regarding the Assumption, they heavily emphasize Mary's prayer, the Magnificat. The parallel here is striking. Just as the Canaanite woman advocated fiercely from the margins, the Magnificat is fundamentally about gratuitous love and God's preference for the least, the poor, and the overlooked.
The Magnificat is not a passive, quiet poem. It is a radical declaration of societal reversal. She rejoices that the mighty have been cast down from their thrones and the lowly have been lifted up. The hungry are filled with good things and the rich are sent away empty.
A text spoken by a young, impoverished woman living under a brutal Roman military occupation. She is the absolute epitome of the marginalized outsider.
Yet, the dogma of the Assumption declares that this specific woman, from this specific marginalized background, was assumed body and soul into heavenly glory. It is the ultimate fulfillment of her own prophecy that God lifts up the lowly.
To understand why a bodily assumption is so radical, we really have to look at the philosophical air the ancient world breathed. Traditions like Gnosticism, Manichaeism, and certain strains of Platonism operated on a strict dualism. They viewed the spiritual realm as pure and good, while the material world, specifically human flesh, was seen as inherently corrupt.
Prison for the soul, essentially. The ultimate religious goal in those systems was to escape the physical body entirely. But that dualistic mindset completely undermines the Jewish and Christian theology of creation.
Because it contradicts the observation in Genesis that God found physical creation very good.
Exactly. The Assumption serves as a definitive rejection of that dualism. By declaring that human flesh is worthy of eternal glory, the Assumption shatters the idea that the body is merely a disposable shell.
Recognizing that the physical body has divine dignity forces a really uncomfortable mirror onto how we treat physical bodies right now on Earth. If divine mercy actively seeks the marginalized, then the modern realities of wealth disparity, homelessness, and political injustice are not just economic issues. They are severe moral failures.
And this is where the theology hits the pavement. If the human body and soul possess that level of inherent divine dignity, we simply cannot treat the physical suffering of people on earth as a secondary or irrelevant concern. True reverence for the Assumption requires committing ourselves to the physical and spiritual needs of the weakest and most vulnerable we meet along the way.
But the dangerous reflex in modern society is to treat compassion as a partisan talking point or a political weapon rather than a fundamental human obligation. When you look at the landscape of contemporary urban policy, the impulse of the disciples remains incredibly prevalent. The vulnerable are often treated as an inconvenience to the economic machinery.
The societal command today is identical to what the disciples said to Jesus. Send them away, for they keep calling out after us. We want the inconvenience removed from our sightlines.
We see that materialized in zoning them out of our neighborhoods, designing public spaces to be hostile to the homeless, and pushing the marginalized further to the edges.
That desire to remove the inconvenient is rooted deeply in the idolatry of comfort and wealth. When resources and security become the ultimate goods, they must be hoarded by the insiders. Overcoming this requires the crucial pivot from passive belief to active social justice. True compassion is a deep, persistent awareness of others' suffering, coupled with an active, concrete wish to relieve it.
The moral clarity demanded by these readings requires us to step out of our demographic silos. Translating the theological principles of Isaiah, Matthew, and the Magnificat into practical action means making everyday decisions: how you spend your money, how you advocate in local government, how you speak about the vulnerable, based on the inherent value of individuals as children of God, rather than falling into cheap, sensationalist rhetoric.
When faith remains abstract, it fails the test presented in the Gospels. The teachings we are reflecting on today demand concrete actions rooted in Christian love. It is the heavy, vital work of ensuring equitable treatment and access to resources for those who've been pushed to the margins.
On a similar note, a clear, undeniable current runs through all of the historical and liturgical reflections today, which is the persistent, boundary-breaking nature of divine mercy. This current flows forcefully from Isaiah's ancient prophecy welcoming foreigners, proving that God's justice is not geographically bound.
It rushes through the Canaanite woman's bold, unyielding faith, shattering the ethnic prejudices of the disciples. And it culminates in the Magnificat's joyful elevation of the humble, confirming that God consistently reorients power toward the lowly.
The message is remarkably consistent across millennia. The borders we draw to protect our comfort are simply not recognized by the divine.
The historical texts are unified in their disruption of human hierarchy. They dismantle the traditional centers of power and consistently reveal that grace, healing, and profound dignity are found on the edges. It is a continuous, millennia-old call to reorient our perspective and our actions toward those who have been forgotten or excluded by the mainstream.
The Canaanite woman changed the trajectory of her daughter's life without societal power, without wealth, and without insider status. She changed it through proximity to Christ and a persistent, undeniable faith that refused to be silenced by the cultural prejudices around her. As you move into the week ahead, look at your own neighborhood, your own workplace, your own community. What table are you currently sitting at, and who nearby is asking for just a scrap of the dignity and grace that you take for granted? Thank you for joining us for this reflection. May you find the courage to serve with love and justice in the days to come. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.